Welcome back to our channel, where we uncover the most gripping true crime stories from around the world. Today, we're delving into another tragic and heartbreaking story of Desiree Mariottini. Desiree Mariottini was born and grew up in Cisterna di Latina, a town with a population of around 37,000 in the province of Latina, approximately 50 kilometers from Rome. Her grandparents were well known in the town. Her grandfather was a union activist, and her grandmother was a lawyer. They disapproved of their daughter Barbara's relationship with a man named Januka, who was considered one of the local drug lords. Despite their objections, the relationship persisted, and Barbara became pregnant at the age of 15. 9 months later, Barbara gave birth to her first daughter, Desiree, who eventually refused to take her father's surname due to his bad reputation. Despite having a young mother and a troubled family, Desiree was a beautiful, sweet and shy girl. She had a foot problem that led to some bullying from boys her age. By the age of 16, Desiree had become a troubled and rebellious teenager who no longer wanted to continue her studies at the agricultural school. An artist at heart, she even won a prize for her painting and aspired to attend an art school in Rome. Finding nothing for her in the small town of Cisterna di Latina, Desiree travelled to Rome without permission. In Rome, Desiree made friends and gained access to illegal substances that no one in her town would sell due to fear of her father. After some time, Januka came after her, attempting to bring her home and even punched Desiree in the face a few times. Desiree reported him to the police. Shortly before these events, Desiree had been arrested for selling Revoltan tablets, a sedative, to 2 other minors. Social services already deemed her situation dangerous and out of control, stating that action was needed to protect her. The officers also requested the juvenile court to place her in a rehabilitation centre and considered the girl dangerous. Her grandmother was taking care of her but had no control over her. Unfortunately, the court did not take prompt action and something terrible happened. Before proceeding, I'd like to share an important message with everyone. We've been exerting our utmost effort to produce top-notch content on our channel. Despite our dedication over a considerable period, we're yet to reach our initial goal of 1,000 subscribers, with 97% of our viewers yet to subscribe. Therefore, we kindly ask you to consider subscribing to our channel if you enjoy our content. A few days later, on Thursday, October 18th, 2018, Desiree travelled to Rome, ostensibly to attend art school. The last her family heard from her was a phone call saying she had missed the last bus back to Cisterna di Latina and would be spending the night in the Italian capital at a friend's house. This friend, Antonella, whom Desiree had met a couple of weeks earlier, allegedly supplied her with illegal substances. Antonella admitted only to giving Desiree money to buy drugs. That night, they went to the so-called Casa de Droga, an abandoned building inhabited by violent people and vandals, a place well known and feared by residents of the San Lorenzo neighbourhood. Desiree was reportedly looking for a tablet that had been stolen or exchanged for illegal substances, as her mother insisted she must find it. According to Antonella, they both went to a place where a man, whom she identified as African, was cooking cocaine. Shortly thereafter, other men arrived and offered the girls alcohol. Antonella refused and tried to persuade Desiree to do the same, but Desiree didn't listen. Antonella then left, leaving Desiree in the company of several men. According to Antonella's testimony, the men gave Desiree illegal substances and told her it was methadone. In fact, Desiree was using a mixture of cannabis and alcohol, which rendered her unable to react. The 4 men achieved their goal of incapacitating her and then carried her to an empty container filled with trash, where a dirty, discarded mattress lay. For several hours they took turns abusing the helpless young girl in front of several witnesses. The group ended the attack with at least one participant suggesting that medical services be called, as Desiree was clearly in a bad state and they feared for her life. However, someone who appeared to be the leader of the group shouted that she'd rather die than have them end up in jail. This phrase was enough to scare away not only the accomplices to the crime, but also the nearby witnesses. The criminals mercilessly abandoned Desiree at the scene, unconscious and without clothes. One woman who spoke to the press under anonymity said she felt very sorry for the girl. She went over, covered Desiree with a sheet, and gave her water and sugar to try to revive her. She felt deep sympathy for the girl, so she approached her, covered her with a sheet, and gave her water and sugar to help revive her. Claiming that Desiree was alive at the time, she also expressed regret for not doing more to help. The following morning, an anonymous caller reported a young girl to emergency services. When officers arrived, they discovered Desiree's lifeless body on a dirty mattress, naked. The investigation commenced, and Desiree's parents were informed of the tragic news as her body was taken for examination. The process was difficult, as no one in the neighbourhood was willing to report the dangerous criminals. The witnesses were homeless drug addicts and outcasts, none of whom wanted to be labelled as informants. Despite this, a Senegalese national came forward voluntarily to the police station just hours after the body was found. He reported that on the night of Desiree's death, he arrived at the scene shortly after midnight and encountered a woman screaming beside the girl's body. The woman claimed that Desiree was dead and mentioned that there were 6 or 7 people present, including some Africans and Arabs, adding that Desiree had been attacked by 3 or 4 men. While the investigation was ongoing, the autopsy results of Desiree's body revealed the full horror of her final hours. Laboratory tests confirmed that she had been drugged with a lethal cocktail of illegal substances and had suffered periods of asphyxiation, presumably when her attackers covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming. It was determined that there were multiple assailants and that Desiree was most likely a virgin at the time of the abuse. The final cause of her death was cardiac and respiratory arrest. The most tragic part is that she lived for about 10 hours after the rape, and if someone had called emergency services, she could have been saved. On October 30th, 2018, family, friends, and hundreds of young people and residents of Cisterna di Latina gathered outside the church to bid farewell to Desiree. They brought flowers and heart-shaped pink and white balloons. With applause and fireworks, a white casket containing her remains was carried in front of the church. Several young people displayed a large banner demanding justice. During the sermon, the local parish priest called on public officials, both central and local, to monitor, control and intervene promptly to combat all forms of violence before they erupt and recur. A few days before the funeral, 2 men were arrested. Madaro, 26, and Brian, 43, both from Senegal and in the country illegally, were arrested thanks to investigations and witness testimonies. A few hours later, Ellen Noima, 46, from Nigeria, who had a residence permit in Rome for humanitarian reasons, and Yusuf Salia from Gambia, who had fled south and was hiding near an immigrant centre, were also arrested. Weapons and illegal substances were seized from the detainees. They were eventually charged with gang sexual assault, possession and distribution of prohibited substances, and premeditated murder. The prosecutor in charge of the case, Mario Tamil, referred to the 4 men as animals who raped a very young and defenceless girl without any pity. Laboratory tests on the 4 suspects confirmed the presence of each suspect's DNA on Desiree's fingernails, clothing and body. The investigation also led to the arrest of Antonella, Desiree's alleged friend, who had accompanied her to the location where she was soon murdered. Despite knowing that Desiree was underage, Antonella still helped her obtain banned substances and was even said to have provided them to her on previous occasions. In the following days, an appeals court dropped the murder charge against Alino Chima, one of the suspects. The court found that while Chima had participated in the rape, he had not provided Desiree with illegal substances. However, a few days later, the murder charge against Alino Chima was reinstated after laboratory tests revealed his DNA on a bottle of methadone. It should be noted that one of the accused, named Salia, had filed a complaint against Desiree's parents, blaming them for not keeping a closer watch on their daughter. The trial of the 4 suspects took place on December 4th, 2019. On that day, Salia denied responsibility for the minor's death and withdrew his complaint against her parents. On November 14th, the court visited the crime scene with inspectors and lawyers to compare the locations of the events with witness testimonies. Regarding witnesses, it's important to note that 4 of them were severely beaten to prevent them from testifying. On the same day, the deputy prosecutor sought life imprisonment for the 4 defendants, along with daily solitary confinement for 1 year. Ultimately, on June 19th, 2021, after nearly 10 hours of deliberation, the judge of the 3rd Criminal Court rendered the verdict. The 4 defendants were found guilty. Muga and Salia were sentenced to life imprisonment. Alino Chima was given a 27-year prison term, and Brian was sentenced to 24 years and 6 months in prison. Barbera Martini, Desiree's mother, was disappointed with the verdict, as she had hoped for 4 life sentences and felt that justice had not been served for her daughter. Desiree's brutal murder stirred significant controversy in Italy. On one side, much of the population expressed anger towards immigrants, arguing that they were harming the country's economy and services and making Italians victims of their crimes. On the other side, more balanced voices stressed that not all immigrants should be generalised and that most are not involved in criminal activities. A few days after the incident, hundreds of people protested around the abandoned building where the crime occurred, insisting that steps had been taken for a long time to shut it down to prevent it from being used as a hub for drug traffickers and other criminals. Saman Lorenzo, once a lively neighbourhood popular with university students and known for its Bohemian charm, became a dangerous area that few dared to visit. This transformation forced local residents to stay indoors or risk becoming victims of crime. Those living in nearby neighbourhoods reported that when a shipment of illegal substances arrived, criminals would launch fireworks from the site to alert their customers about the availability of the goods. Antonio Tajani, President of the European Parliament, stated that what happened to Desiree should be the last tragedy in Italy, especially in Rome. He called for a city meeting and stressed that moral and social degradation is evident, advocating for enhanced police control, particularly at night. The mayor of Rome announced plans to demolish the building where the crime occurred, expressing that as a woman, she could not tolerate such a heinous act. In Desiree's memory, a red bench was unveiled in a square in Rome. The ceremony was attended by her mother, who hoped the bench would serve as a refuge and a place of solace for those experiencing pain and loneliness. Additionally, the Q Crime channel offers numerous other captivating cases for you to explore. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with Q Crime Story videos every day. Farewell for now, and we eagerly anticipate your presence in our future videos.